Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Radio Inquisition. My name is Erik Nagel. Today, we'll be talking to a young man named Garrett Vogel, who got an internship at the #1 station, Z100, in the #1 market, New York City, for the #1 syndicated morning program, Elvis Duran and the Morning Show. Now, he's only worked at one station, and at this point, 17 years, which is a very impressive feat, especially in today's unstable world of broadcasting. We'll talk about what it is he actually does there, his influences, other hosts, other shows, and what's next for his career. You can listen to the Elvis Duran and the Morning Show every single weekday morning out of Z100 in New York City, syndicated across the country on a station in a market near you, or you can just pop on the iHeartRadio app where you can listen to it live every day, or you can find each day's show on demand, so you don't miss a damn thing. Now, with all that being said, please do us a kindness and check out Garrett Vogel, who's coming up next.
Radio Inquisition. Erik Nagel's Radio Inquisition.
Hi, Garrett. How are you?
Erik, I'm great. This, you know what? It's kind of cool. Before we get started, I appreciate you. You know, you wanted to sit down. We've been trying to get this on the books for a year and a half almost.
Well, I'll just point out that, you know, if this was 2 years ago, we'd be on the same page, but you're a lot busier than I am nowadays.
Yes and no. But, you know, listening to you, it's weird to say I listened to you, you know, back in the day, because we're practically the same age.
Yeah.
But, like, you were a part of a show that helped me get into radio, essentially, aside from Elvis, but with O&A. So this is cool for me.
Well, it's weird to say this to you, too. I mean, usually I say this to people older than myself, but I've been listening to Elvis's show for, on and off since the Elvis and Elliot days. Right. And, and you've been a big part of this program for a long time now. So getting a chance to talk to you, it's like I didn't grow up with you, but, dude, you've been part of...
I appreciate it.
Thank you. How do you put it? You're the morning show I listen to, but not in the morning.
Yeah, I get it. Well,
because of on-demand and stuff, and my schedule, I'm usually downloading your show after you guys load it up on on-demand, and I listen to you in the afternoon.
I mean, if you're a fan of radio or just a fan of technology in general, you know, that's almost how the world is going. I think radio will always be there, you know, no matter what, because death, doom, and destruction, you still can turn to a radio, especially if the internet goes out. What do you turn to? You turn to the radio, because TV is out, because cable's out. So radio will always be there. Now, how you listen to it might change or evolve a little bit, you know, but the basis of, a transistor radio, AM, FM radio will always be there. Just more people will start leaning towards phones and streaming and listening at the computer or wherever. So, you know, we're in one of those not weird but interesting times where we're watching a change happen as we're going, pretty much.
And we're all trying to keep up with it.
Exactly, keep up with the Joneses.
Let's talk about for a little bit what you're doing now. You work for Z100 in New York and part of the Elvis Duran and the Morning Show, nationally syndicated radio show. What do you do here?
So it's interesting. At the end of the day, if I write it down on paper, it's like that's all I do. So it started out with just answering phones, like back in the day, just straight answering phones for conversations for the morning show. And then, you know, you want to grow. And so I pretty much said I want to start doing other stuff.
Promotions?
I did
That's
promotions.
Usually the gateway outside of an internship to getting into a station, to a show, is phone screening and promotions.
Well, that's how I started, pretty much, doing the same at the same time. But I told Elvis, I go, I want to grow. And, you know, as you might know, but if you don't know, there's a lot of people on our show. We're an anomaly in the radio industry where we have 12 plus people working on our show, which is a rarity.
Yeah.
So it's hard to come by, you know, whether someone leaves or someone gets let go. That's the only way you move up. So I had to find a niche. And I started working here literally when YouTube just started. Like, YouTube just came onto the scene. I was one of the first to understand the idea of sound, because that's what radio is, ultimately, at the end of the day, is sound. So I started finding viral videos of, you know, those slingshot rides at carnivals that send people...
Where the kids are screaming
or get me off, or they vomit and whatever. So I took a clip of that, threw it on the air, and Elvis was like, let's do more of this. So it just started becoming, you know, scouring the internet for anything and everything, and bringing it to the show. And then from there, I go, the possibilities are endless. So then I go, well, not just that. Let's go out and do red carpet interviews for premieres here at in New York City for movies. So, then it started with doing interviews with Leonardo DiCaprio and bringing that audio to it, because Leonardo DiCaprio, like it or not, is not coming to sit down and talk with us in studio because he's A+ list actor.
Well, not with that attitude.
Well, true. But ultimately, trust me, if we call Leonardo DiCaprio right now, there's no way he will be like, okay, great. I'll get back to you in about 45 years. So started doing interviews and bringing that sound in there, and then I just became pretty much the sound guy. And then I go, hey, can I start doing prank calls? And they said, hell yeah. So we started letting me do prank phone calls, and then I look at my job as like waiting online at a merry-go-round, a very fast one. When's my time to jump in and jump on and then jump off? Because there's the core base of our show. So it's like a lot of things like that. And then just making sure the show doesn't run off the rails.
So that's for the morning show.
Yeah.
You have separate station responsibilities as well?
Well, so it's interesting. Like a lot of people in the industry, like on our show and in the industry, have contracts. I've been fortunate enough to never have a contract in 17 years here with the radio station.
Some would say that's good. Some would say that's bad.
Well, it walks a fine line, right? Could be let go tomorrow without the repercussion of, having a safety net. But I'm in a very fortunate position with a guy who pretty much values what he has. So Elvis is a guy that literally is the Kevin Costner to my Whitney Houston. Like, he would make sure he always has your back no matter where he is, to make sure you're protected, because he values his team and his show. I work for Z100. I'm considered an hourly employee pretty much. I get paid by the hour.
That is so weird.
And I tell people that and they're like, what? But it's true. I'm the quote unquote essential 40-hour work week person, just like anybody out there.
To people who don't work in the radio industry or the entertainment industry, they would think, because you're in New York and you work on this major morning show, everyone's got to be a millionaire.
Right.
That's the old misconception
and
for a lot of people.
You're
thinking,
a millionaire.
I mean, a few times over, yes, and thank you for recognizing that. But that's the misconception with people. It's like, you think, you have connection to all these celebrities and music acts, and your life must be great. And yes, it is, but you're not a millionaire in a lot of the aspects. Elvis, the big contracted people, Ryan Seacrest, they are.
Yeah. Howard, yeah.
Yeah, everybody else around that, the peripheral people around that, have their own separate deals. So who knows what they're making.
Right.
But to find out you're an hourly,
yep.
Even people in the industry hearing that, I'll even go, what? That's just a weird, unique situation to be in.
Because the way I started, in the radio industry, especially, that the only way you're going to make a name for yourself is you got to do it yourself.
Right.
No one's going to send over the golden ticket and saying, here, you're the next, whatever.
Right.
You kind of have to make it for yourself. So I started as an hourly employee, starting answering phones. And then it turned into, well, okay, that's great. I can't make a career out of answering phones, so I got to start doing stuff on my own. So I said, hey, let me get on the radio. Let me do this. Let me do that. And it kind of snowballed into stuff. And then clients started saying, hey, let's use him, for a spot here and there. And it just started building like that, based off of just forcing my way through the front door as opposed to waiting to be welcome in.
Right.
Pretty much.
From the top of the Empire State Building.
Good morning. What up? My name is Garrett. Coming up in about 18 minutes, we got the latest from Mike Posner. It's called I Took a Pill in Ibiza. I like it. I think you will too. Also, going to tell you how you could be going to San Francisco to check out Coldplay at Super Bowl 50. All coming up next.
This is New York's #1 hit music station.
Is this the first station that you applied to? Like, are you one of those guys that just happened to be, look, I started as an intern and I've worked my way through and I'm still here?
Yep.
Wow.
100%.
Good for you.
I was in high school, and Elvis and the show were doing a bowl-a-thon from on Staten Island in New York, where I live. I said, let me go over. I listen to them every morning on my way to school. I think they're funny. They'd be cool to meet them, say hello, say I'm a fan. And I got to meet Elvis, and I ended it with something I never thought I was going in there for. Like, I'd love to work on your show one day. And he goes, go get college credit. And I'm in high school, so obviously I can't get college credit yet. I said, all right, fine. I'm a senior in high school. I'd love to. So what I did that summer was I went to Tower Records in Times Square. The whole Osbourne family was doing an autograph signing.
Okay.
I hit on Kelly Osbourne, and I went back to tell Elvis. He goes, "You got to come talk about this." Went back to the studio, got to sit in on the whole show and tell my Kelly Osbourne story about how I tried to, hit on Kelly Osbourne, and maybe she was into it, blah, blah, blah. She probably wasn't, whatever. And then that led into freshman year of college at Rider University in Jersey. And I went in first day of college, not knowing anything, not knowing my roommate, not knowing what classes I had. I went straight to the communications professor. I go, "I need an internship." And they laughed. They're like, "Well, what?" I go, "I could have an internship right now." They're like, "Well, it's junior, senior. You got to wait.
Yeah.
Turns into a job down the road." I go, "No." So they gave me a internship freshman year. I started answering phones for Elvis that summer. And then by junior, senior year, I ran out of my internship credit because they only do 2 internship credits. So I wrote thesis. I was like, let me write a thesis about morning radio. So I did that my junior year as credit, quote unquote. And they're like, "Well, what are you going to do senior?" I go, "I'm going to write one about the production side of radio in my senior year." And then spring semester of my senior year at college, when I'm supposed to be getting wasted, waking up, next to God knows who in a quad, half naked, I got the job here at the radio station and would wake up at 1:00 in the morning and drive up to where we were at the time, Jersey City, and started answering phones. And a week later, I told my roommate, "This is not fair to you." So I moved out of campus, still graduated that year, but lived with my parents for 6 months just to be close to work.
Do the job.
Yep.
You are the quintessential radio guy.
Yeah.
Because similar on my end, where through high school and through college, when I should be going out partying and drink, I'm home on a Friday night learning audio editing. And I said, well, right. I could take clips from TV shows and movies and extract them into the computer, and then I can edit them into production. And I can make and that's what I did. Like, I had the exact opposite that most people have, where my parents were like, "You really need to go out and do things. It's Friday night, go outside and go meet people." And I was not doing that. And it sounds a little similar to you too, where you're just like, I'm not going out drinking, I'm not going out partying because I'm taking this seriously. And at such an early age too, where most people in college would go, "Well, you know what? I got 4 years. Yeah. I can worry about that when I go to graduate and everything." And you hit the ground running going into college. That like, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I need to get done.
Garrett, what was that email you sent me? I didn't understand it.
I was looking at some photos of me kissing my wife, and it always looks like I'm desperate for a kiss because I always put out my lips.
You're like puckered?
Yeah, always puckered, as opposed to like meeting together.
So yeah, you've like duck face.
I kind of have a duck face, and it just looks weird, and it started to make me think that, am I a bad kisser?
So I'm trying to figure out why you emailed me.
After the fact, I asked the question. It started getting in my head like, am I doing something wrong? Or
I got to be honest with you. I don't think she would have dated you much longer after you met if you were a bad kisser.
Yeah.
Hey, Scary, go kiss Garrett.
No.
Wow.
Guys, are you supposed to pucker up?
I don't know. Maybe I'm like in desperate need or whatever. I don't.
That is kind of funny. You close your eyes and you pucker up.
And I have a football field's away to go before I kiss her.
You could fall over. You could trip on the coffee table or something.
You know, like a video of the person running through the field of daisies with their arms
puckered
over
up.
wide, puckered up.
It is holding his arms out like Frankenstein. Yeah. Like, I'm going to kiss you.
See, that is a problem.
Well, yeah. If I saw that coming, I would definitely burn the house down.
Elvis Duran in the Morning Show.
And it goes back to like my mom works for ABC. She grew up. I grew up pretty much playing on the sets of Regis and Kathy Lee. Like, so I was surrounded in the entertainment, like media news
over
business.
In 62nd, 3rd, somewhere in there.
Yeah, uptown New York.
Yeah.
So I would literally play on the sets at 10 o'clock after the show. Then I would go around the corner behind the set and watch the news recorded live. People are at home watching a TV, and I'm sitting behind a camera. And so I just kind of got that bug of like, I knew I didn't want to go crunch numbers. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but personally for me, it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I was going to be bored by it.
You're not that kind of guy.
You know, it was either that or the dream of 4th grade of trying to play basketball in the NBA. But by 7th grade, I realized that's not an attainable dream. So let me do something more realistic that I can enjoy.
You know, that's another thing you and I have in common. You spend a lot of time hanging up at the ABC studios there on the Upper West Side. I did the same. but I was under the guise that I was working for this radio station.
Right.
And I would hang out on the line for the Tony Danza show. And I would talk to the Midwest rubes who would come off the bus to see Tony. And I'd find
I love him. He's great.
Some gullible females where I'd talk to them. And I said, do you want to talk to Tony? Yeah. And Anthony Cumia, who I worked with Opie Anthony, does a spot-on Tony Danza impersonation. So my job was to be on the line there, and anybody want to talk to Tony? And whoever said yes, I'd give them the phone, and you'd have these like really inappropriate conversations with them, right?
That's Anthony.
And then would tell as Tony, right? So they think they're talking to Tony, like he's inviting them back to the dressing room and stuff. And then there's a couple of times where he would say, "Look, when I finish the monologue, I'm going to do this, and when I do that, I want you to run up. I'll be wearing a Spider-Man thing. Give me a big hug." One time we watched it, we saw a lady getting up, and they cut away, like she got up, and I'm like, "Oh my god, that lady actually believed this." We did it for so many times, and finally, I think the last one I did was they had a clipboard. I guess somebody was tipping them off that we were doing this, and I kind of looked and I see our show photos on this clipboard. So I was like, all right, one last chance, we're going to do this. So when I got asked for, like, who are you, where do you work for? I gave a fake name and said I worked at this radio station, right? And then we were live on XM at the time.
Opie and Anthony, XM 202.
Hey, you want to do me a favor?
Sure.
Now, as soon as I walk out,
okay,
I'll walk out on a stage.
Okay.
And I want you to, the audience is applauding because I'm Tony Danza.
Uh-huh.
And you come out. And I'll be like, oh, here's someone from the crowd. And just say, I love you, Tony, and give me a kiss on the cheek.
Ah, that'd be awesome.
And then you go back to your seat, and I'll give you a CD, and you come back and give me a massage.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I'm so excited.
And so am I.
Thank you.
I won't ruin it by saying anything else.
All right.
I look forward to seeing you on stage at the beginning of the show.
I sure will. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you very much. God bless you too. Bye-bye.
Hey, guys.
Eric.
Hey, we have the head of security here is right next to me. He wants to confirm that it's really Z100.
Yeah, sure.
We have somebody from the company who wants to, if you want to confirm it.
Oh, what happened there? Uh-oh.
Well,
is there a problem?
Sounds like somebody's onto this shenanigans.
I knew it. I knew it was too good to be true. Someone from the show knows the deal now.
That stinks.
Oh.
And they were trying to detain me. They were trying to hold me, and they said, we're getting the cops or whatever. It's like, you can't hold me. I was sitting there having an argument with these guys.
You ever tell our friend Brody that story?
I don't know if Brody knows.
You should tell him that story.
Okay, because it was all on the air. Hearing me arguing with the security for ABC Studios, like they wouldn't let me go. They were blocking me from trying to cross the street. And then finally, I got
private security there. Then those.
But they were trying to hold me as they were trying to call the cops or saying that they were going to call the cops. And then I got out of there and ran back to the XM studios. But yeah, I used to go up there all the time just to talk to the rubes on the line. Fun radio stuff.
Tony Danza, then it was Rachel Ray, and I think it was the same studio. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was filmed there.
Yep.
Very familiar. I know that I grew up there. That's the street I grew up on pretty much when I went into work with Mom.
So you're trying to get college credit and get everything that the college requires for you to do this internship. You wound up writing a thesis paper, like you said. Did you do anything communication-wise at the college? Did they have a radio station, a TV station? Were you part of that?
They did. I probably cracked the mic twice in my 4 years at Rider University.
Live from the Rider University studios, you're listening to
the biggest hits, the best variety.
107.7 The Bronx,
WRRC.
It's so interesting. Like, people are like, oh, you're a major part. Like, my face is plastered at the radio station at Rider now. Cracked the mic maybe 2-3 times. It was pretty loosey-goosey. Like, there wasn't a structure, there wasn't a program. Then once they realized that I graduated from Rider,
right,
they started formulating, like, running it like an actual radio station. It's 107.7 like in Central Jersey, so it has broadcast signal. People can hear it if you're in Central Jersey at any given time. I could walk in there with any given CD. Obviously, you still have to follow the FCC guidelines and just play it. There wasn't a formula. You could talk from like 2 to 6 o'clock if you wanted and just do whatever you want. There was no rules, pretty much.
And you're now the poster child for that radio station.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I did more TV stuff than radio stuff, but as we were just talking earlier, like the worlds are kind of like, intertwining where radio is TV and TV is radio as long as it's content and you get it on your phone or wherever. So
see, I had the exact opposite where I bust my ass because I spent a lot of my younger years and then into high school trying to figure out. We grew up in the shadows of New York City, biggest market. A lot of the best talent is out of New York. So trying to figure out how Scott Shannon, how Howard Stern, Bob Grant, my grandfather used to listen to in the afternoon, and I would listen if I was in the car. But at CBS FM, how did they do the processing? How did they do the jingles? How did they have... I was trying to figure all that stuff out, as well as how they're doing their shows and being a radio personality. And this is the mid-'90s. You don't really have the access to the technology like you do now.
Of course.
You can do everything on your phone, where back then I was lucky to have a computer.
You're going to Radio Shack or the Wiz.
And trying to find somebody with a sound effects library, you know? So when I got into college, I got into the college station. I dove right in, and I spent a lot of time there and then wound up leaving for doing stuff with for Scott and Todd and PLJ. And all my time there at the college station, I was a music director. I was doing a show. I was doing all this stuff. So then when things go really well, Opie and Anthony time, right? I reach back out to the college, to the station. I want to make donations. I want to do stuff or, have access to all this. Maybe I'll do some imaging for them, whatever they want. Couldn't get anybody to respond. I went above the station. I'm like, all right, college kids, they're probably not understanding. Go even higher, went to the administrators. Whoever was still left in the comm department that maybe was a professor of mine or something. Nothing, went even higher than that. No acknowledgement, no nothing, no anything for it. And then anytime college, nothing. And I kind of got resentful for it. And I said, all right, that's the way it's going to be. I'm going to take this personally. So anytime we talk about college or anything comes up, where'd you go to college? Not talking about it. Why not? Not promoting it.
Don't want to ask. No, I get it. Fair. That's fair within itself too. I mean,
because you would think a college.
Well, I was the same way. Like
anybody that was famous from a college, and I went to a school that didn't have a lot of famous people. Coming from it, but you'd think anybody. Look how Ryder jumped right all on you, and you did maybe 2 shifts on there.
Well, at first it was like, okay, kid, see you later. Like the first 2 years, once I graduated, they're like, oh, that's sweet, nice job. I'm like, well, it's kind of a big show in New York, and you could kind of hear it at school because it's Central Jersey, so it's that weird cutoff if you don't have satellite.
Into Philly,
yeah, it kind of like bleeds. I'm like, we're on in Philadelphia too. We're smack in the middle, and they're like, okay, great. Not until about like 4 years ago that like the light bulb went off, and it was like, oh shit! You're someone. Okay, no problem. Not that I'm someone, but you graduated from our school and you have a good job. Though I don't work for Johnson & Johnson and can donate $10 million like some people do.
Right.
There's still that recognition from there. So it was a battle. It wasn't like, okay, let's.
Well, at least you got it 4 years ago.
No,
I'm almost 20 years removed. I've never even been back. After I was done with school, I never even went back to
See, I'm going for the gusto. You know what I want now? I want commencement.
I have all my college tapes. I'm debating putting out a college special of just hear how bad everything is.
Well, knowing what you did at O&A, how bad would you judge yourself?
Content-wise, obviously, the O&A years were a lot more interesting.
Right.
But I think those college tapes, I'm afraid to listen to them because I think my Long Island accent was way too heavy. And that's when I really started working on losing a lot of it.
Right.
Because you sound like an idiot if you have too heavy.
Well, I'm from Staten Island, and my one thing is.
But you're light.
Right.
That's the thing.
I really don't have the hey, how you doing? Hey. I equate it to the fact that I'm not Italian because a lot of people from Staten Island in New York and just like Long Island have that Italian-ish Rocky Balboa accent.
Yeah. Like everybody's ready to fight.
Yeah, well, that too. Irish and German, so I just never was around it really. People are always shocked. I don't know about you. Like when you say like, oh, I'm from Long Island, they're like, no way. And like when I go, I'm from Staten Island, and if you know the area, they're like, really? Yeah, I know. I don't sound like I'm from there. I'm the low man.
Yeah.
I don't have an accent. Get over it.
So you go through college. College radio didn't really do anything for you because you jumped right past that, and good for you. You go right into Z100 here in New York.
I literally had to take a day off from working at the radio station because at the time of graduation, I've had my job now for about 4 months. I had to take a day off, my first day off, 4 months into the job, just so I can go to graduation.
Wow. Oh, it's like, we thought you were done. No, it's like, no, I got to go get my diploma, and then I'll be back tomorrow, I promise.
Yeah. So it was cool kind of like listening in the car as I'm driving to graduation. I'm like, I got a job. And most of the people are still looking for jobs. So
on my end, I would have been terrified being in the car going to graduation listening if I had the job, because I know that O&A are tearing me apart and they're trying to get listeners to go down there to ruin it. So I was just like,
luckily,
you have a show that's not doing that. I had to not tell them things.
So it's interesting. Like O&A really didn't go in on Elvis hardly ever.
There's a reason for that.
Well, you're right. But as a phone screener, my guard was always up because, yes, we had a delay button, but you were always looking for the genuine person. And no fault to people listening that were trying to prank call to get on another radio show and name drop or just say something silly. I got a good ear from listening to O&A versus callers of our radio show where there was the put on act versus the genuine act.
Right.
Like if you called into the radio show and I was talking to you and you didn't know what was going on, then I would do a follow-up question like, so what are you doing right now? And if they didn't have their script ready to go, I wouldn't call bullshit on them. I would just be like, all right, hey, listen, we're moving on right now. Can't get to you. Versus the genuine caller, like, hey, I need to say what Elvis just said and say blah, X, Y, and Z. Then I know. But it's interesting. My guard would be up because Howard, and more Howard than O&A, but I'd listen to O&A, so I knew what I was looking for pretty much.
Well, I'll explain why O&A in a second, but since you mentioned Howard there, it's got to be well known that he was obsessed with the station for the longest time.
Yeah. Well, because his daughter,
even before that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right. So he used to have a thing where, look, he was trying to be top dog when he was building in the 80s and 90s. So he would go after Scott Shannon, who was number one at the time at the station back in the day. And then when Scott came back from LA over at PLJ, anytime he goofed on something with music, whatever, he'd always say Z100. He never really said K-Rock.
Right.
It was always Z100. Then as time went on and you guys were doing the Jingle Ball going into the late 90s, early 2000s, it was known that Howard was getting tickets to take his daughter to this place. He always idolized this station because of how it sounded and where it was on the dial, which is why
in the middle.
Which is why it's Howard 100 over at Sirius XM.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's one here in New York. Everywhere else where you're listening don't know the station, but here in New York, it's 100.3.
Right in the middle of the dial.
And the history of this station was this station was nothing until '83 when it turned on, and then it became the number one station in 70 days, something like that, some unreal record.
Worst to first campaign.
And it's been the number one pop station that every other station molds itself around in the country. So this station's a big deal. But when he was setting up over at Sirius, Howard 100 is because it's the middle of the dial.
Yep.
Like Z100 was. So he was learning from all of this stuff while he was doing his thing. He was learning how the other end of this was working and then using that for him.
Do you think, I mean, obviously it's one of those things we'll never have an answer, but let's just say K-Rock, where Howard was originally, was in the middle of the dial.
Right.
And knowing position, like he appreciated the station for what it was, the way it sounded.
He hated it that it was at 92.3.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Like he's at the middle of the dial. Do you think he would have lasted longer on terrestrial based off of his location on the dial, knowing that more people would be prone to tune to the middle of the dial as opposed to the end of it?
No, I don't think it would have mattered because he fought at the right time at the late 80s and where he made into the 90s when he made his identity, and then really started making headway when he was live in Philly.
Right.
And then he was having the funeral in Philly. Then he got on in LA and had the funeral in LA for Mark and Bryant. Then he got on to DC. I think he only did like 3 funerals, maybe 4. I think one in Cleveland too.
Right.
So he was getting into these markets at the time where you could still kind of fuck up and it didn't really impact your career. You could do those kind of things. Yeah, I don't think the positioning of...
well, I was just saying like
it would have helped the station more than it would have helped him.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the Howard thing, the O&A thing that you're talking about with Elvis. And that was because it was twofold. One, because of my friendship with Brody.
Right.
And 2, that I had met Elvis over the years for so many times. Always a genuine guy, was always nice to me. Never once did I run into him where, like, you could run into people and sometimes they had a bad day or something was going on.
Well, I mean, know, there's a lot of personalities in the industry on both TV, radio, whatever. They're a bunch of a-holes. Like, they just think they're bigger than the world.
Right.
You know, in reality, they're not.
Right. And he's been genuine to me every time I met the dude. And,
which is true. I mean,
and I respected what, even before your time here, I respected everything that they were building after they were taking over the Morning Zoo format and then changing that to get rid of that and make it its own thing. And then Elliot went to DC and all these things happening. And I always admired that because if it wasn't for O&A and wasn't Howard, the right after that was Elvis's show.
Yeah.
Just from the way it ran and the way it sounded, that was what I was listening to. So I had done time with Scott and Todd for a couple of years in the late 90s. And their afternoon show was a guy named Rocky Allen. Rocky was always great to me. Scott is Scott, but Scott, I always admire Scott, and Scott was, pretty decent to me. Todd was never nice.
Right.
Ever. And I've always resented that because he was really a dick. And it wasn't just being a dick. He did some things. And I said, you know what? I'm never going to forget that. So when we started doing Jocktober and we started doing those things, I said, look, I have their production library. I have all their stuff that he does for his phone scams. I have all these things. We can really put a 1-2 on this stuff. So Scott and Todd became a staple every year for Jocktober until the second year when Jim Norton and Anthony started to realize that it wasn't Scott that was a problem with all of this.
It was Todd.
It was Todd. And I said, I've been telling you it was him. And he had to be a part of it every year.
And that's what grew your relationship on the show with Scott. Then Scott became more, Scott became more of a friend than a punchline.
Look, I used to call this station when I was a kid.
And me too.
Like Scott has tapes of me calling in like 84. I used to just call him in the morning. I'd dial them. He'd say the phone number. I just would dial. I'd be like, hello, and he'd put me on every now and then. Just to talk.
That was me with Elvis. Growing up, how do you start listening to music? You don't know. You just listen. At the time, it was like whatever was on the radio. So I would listen to Elvis intro a song like Basket Case from Green Day. I would write it down on my notebook and then find a payphone because I knew 1-800 numbers didn't need quarters.
Right.
And I'd be like, oh, can you play Green Day Basket Case? He would pick up and say, oh, yeah, no problem, knowing the fact that he just played Basket Case. But that's all I knew because I didn't know music. All I knew was the last song that he introduced, and that's how I started learning about music.
So that's the reason why we didn't go after Elvis, was just because I liked Elvis. I liked everybody here was so nice, and I'm like, they don't really deserve it.
See, but at the time, we didn't know, like, no one knew that. Like, no one knew the relationship that was there, and so knowing...
On your end, you're all hands on deck.
All hands on deck because you never knew what was going to come in at any given time.
For those who don't know some of the stuff we're talking about with the Jocktober feature with Opie and Anthony, it was a month where we'd go and scour the airwaves around the country and find morning shows or just radio people that were not doing a good job,
right?
Or really were dicks to people, or ones that were not cool to the comic friends of ours. There was always different reasons for why
everybody
we
has
picked people,
a story, yeah.
Right? So we'd monitor their show for a couple of days. We'd pull elements that we could make fun of. Their production, it was bad. They said dumb things, whatever it was. We never did that with Elvis's show because Elvis's show didn't run that way. I was friends with people here, and it just didn't seem like it really didn't make sense. Plus, in the back of my head, too, I go, this could all go away one day.
Yeah.
I still want to stay in New York, so I really don't want to mess with the guy who's number one right now because we and Howard left terrestrial. We're over at satellite, so he's kind of the big deal. Don't really want to go after that. And it worked out really good. At one point, they were trading little messages back and forth. I have the audio somewhere. I should put that up online, where O&A would say something, I'd send it over to Brody, and Elvis would play, and then Elvis and Danielle would say something back to them. It was kind of fun.
Right.
Where's the one who wouldn't like Opie and Anthony?
I like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think she's new.
Okay, good. Hope she's fired.
Love Opie and Anthony.
Well, anyway, so, but I feel like they have these long conversations. See, we have to stop down and play Happy by Pharrell from time to time.
Yeah.
But they can talk for like 4 hours without ever taking a break. They must pee.
Awesome.
They must like pee in their pants while they're doing their show. I don't know how they do it. But I feel like you just start talking
Denny's
to them
mouth.
and you realize, wait a minute, they don't hear me.
I wonder why they're not responding or laughing at your jokes.
It's true, but we're talking to them. So anyway, hi Opie, hi Anthony, we're talking to you.
Hi, Elvis.
Hey, Elvis Duran.
Hi,
That's kind of cool.
Cute chick with the red hair.
The Opie and Anthony Show on Sirius XM.
I grew up listening to it. Like, it kind of, obviously you learn from your friends about life and guys and boobs and whatever, but O&A was that to me. Like, that was my afternoon, way, with a Walkman, hanging out. All right, I'm learning about stuff that I probably wouldn't learn at school,
right.
And they were my staple. They were my afternoon staple.
Speaking of your influences, so you have Elvis, you have O&A. Finding out that you like the radio and you want to get, what did you grow up listening to? What did your parents listen to? What were you first exposed to?
My dad was the classical dad listening to...
Can I guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
CBS FM?
Yep.
Yeah, just like mine.
was the one that kind of got me into the on the quote unquote pop side of it, because I guess she was just tired of listening. She wasn't into doo-wop. Like she was more current than oldies.
Right.
Like my dad's oldies. He's slowly getting more current and listening. But yeah, and my mom was more on the current side. So when Z100 came around, like that's what she would listen to in the car. So I started to by default. Not knowing anything, like not knowing that, it wasn't cool to be listening to it. I should have been listening to Hot 97 and hip hop. And, I literally would go to school.
I think everyone in this area has that same or similar story, that you were first, you're influenced and introduced to radio and music by your parents.
Right, of course.
Because, now they have YouTube and you find it in it. But, when you were in the car, you were kind of stuck listening to whatever they put on the radio there. And that's where you learned to listen to these DJs and how these stations sounded and whatever the music was that your parents liked. And then that kind of integrated into you until you started to realize, oh, I could change the dial and I can listen to something else.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. My dad listening to like Dan Abrams and those guys, and then
I remembered what was it? Because there was something called the Doo-Wop Shop.
Yep,
and that sounded completely different than the rest of the station. The imaging was different. The way the flow of it was different. I think the guy's name was Don K. Reed's Doo-Wop Shop.
I believe so. Yeah,
right. And that would come in there, and that was that's my dad's favorite part because he loved all that stuff. Obviously Cousin Brucey and Dandy Dan Daniels. Yeah, all those guys. Just like you, that's what you're stuck listening to, especially if you're in the car with your dad.
Yeah, so I really didn't get into rock. Didn't get into hip-hop. So I was just listening to the pop stuff. So 8th grade, you're allowed to get away with it because people really don't have that, like, you don't have the quote the quintessential like bullies yet. Like, that's high school.
Right.
But high school, that's where, I was still listening to what I knew, what I knew. So I was listening to Z100. And then that's where like it kind of started. That's where I started building my thick skin. Because people, you're either listening to hip hop, which I have no problem with hip hop. I listen to hip hop. I listen to rock now. I'm more eclectic, but growing up, I listened to pop. So I would get called sissy, pussy, like all.
Was
all
it because of the music genre, or was it because a lot of people view Z100 as like a girls' radio station?
Both.
Okay,
the music genre of boy bands and pop teeny boppers, and to me it was music. Yeah, I didn't look at it like, oh, this is. Yeah, but going to an all boys high school, that's like it's the punchline of
Catholic high school.
Yeah,
okay,
Catholic all boys high school.
That explains it.
The punchline of most of the jokes. So fast forward to like my second year working at the radio station, I'm literally sitting at Jingle Ball before the doors open in the middle of Madison Square Garden, and you want one of those like goosebump moments. I was sitting there and I said in my head, I'm like, oh shit. Go back 10 years ago when you're in the hallway and you get called a for listening to a radio station and you're sitting in the middle of Madison Square Garden before 25,000 people come into a show that you're a part of, putting on a huge show that people want to be at. But at that time, you wouldn't have known that. It was like my Oprah, oh wow moment, my aha moment. I'm like, all right, I'm in. I did it. It sucked trying to get down to that road. But to me, that was my I did it moment. I made it moment.
So is Z100 the station that, because you're a dad now, is this the station that these kids will say?
They're listening to by default.
I listen to Z100 because that's what my dad had on in the car.
Well, it's that, and to hear me. It's kind of cool to come home and hear a commercial or hear a spot or hear a podcast.
Do they recognize it?
They do.
Okay.
But it's weird, as we're talking about how technology evolves, my 4-year-old thinks everything's Alexa enabled. So in the car, which isn't Alexa enabled, it's Alexa turn on, blah, blah, blah. We're like, it doesn't, Alexa's not in the car.
How old are your kids?
4 and 2.
Okay.
So to them,
that makes sense. If they were 13, you'd be like, look, we need to have a talk.
We need to have a talk.
That phone. Yeah.
You've been sniffing too much gasoline. But it's one of those moments that though they might not fully remember, they'll remember to a degree after radio's career is long gone. Maybe they will, maybe they won't.
So your kids are younger
more for me than them.
Your kids are younger, so you're not at that point yet where it would matter to you more than it does to them. I love the stories Brody tells me about his kids where he's been doing this for so long and they grew up listening to all this stuff that it's not important to them anymore. So if they hear him on there, they're like, oh, could you just turn this off? I don't want to listen to it.
It's like that. Like my wife, I've been with her. We've been married going on 6 years, but we've been together like 14 years.
Right.
It used to be like, oh, you're doing a prank call today. What's it about? And it's like, oh, cool. Great. It's not because she doesn't care. It's just there's so much more going on in life that it's there. My friends get a kick out of it, which is weird. Just sitting in the car like in an Uber, and then my one douche friend would be like, "Hey, it's that's the guy," and then the Uber driver's like, "Oh, really?" And then they make a big deal out of it, but they get a kick out of it.
It's like you got to leave a great tip now because now he thinks you're a millionaire.
Yeah, and it's on my rating too. Like so, and that's the other thing. People think it's like, yeah, you must be balling. I'm like, I drive a Toyota Camry. Come on.
Yeah. Was there anything else about who else you grew up listening to? I mean, station wise, one thing. Elvis is a personality. O&A a personality. Howard's a personality. But was there anybody? And these were all, they were New York, but they were also national personalities.
Yeah.
Anybody local that you kind of grew that kind of caught your ear and go, I kind of liked what that guy was doing, or I like this talk show.
It was the afternoon guy at the radio station here too. Like he was the guy that would get crafty, like where I didn't understand radio at the time. Obviously, I was just a listener. So it wasn't like learning about just being you and having fun.
Right.
He was that over the top fun guy, Cubby, Paul Cubby Bryant, who now has a morning show over at Light FM. But he was the guy that would take songs and kind of like rework them to get to a funny punchline without overdoing it. The one that I always remember, he would cue up right before like a Nickelback song. He would say, this next song costs 95 cents. And then the guy on the phone would be like, well, here's $1. And then he would go, here's your Nickelback. And then go right in. Like
those are dad jokes.
It's so, but they were dad jokes. But but
they're tolerable. Yeah.
When you're 14 years old, dad jokes are like the jokes next to your mom jokes. You know what I mean? Like you still laugh at them. So that kind of like caught my ear in the sense I think he's having a lot of fun. And then when I first started working at the radio station, I got to answer phones for him. So it was like I kind of help him out, like craft stuff like that. So Cubby was a lot, and then as I started working here, start listening to people around the country, just like you did, more so for the fun content side. But you start meeting people at junkets, and you start meeting people at company functions. So Cubby is the one that probably stuck out after that. I used to listen to Ed Lover too when he worked at Power 105.
I grew up watching him on MTV Raps, but he was on what was called the Backspin channel at SiriusXM.
Yep,
and there'd be plenty of times where the show I was doing solo outside of O&A started on Saturdays, then moved to Fridays. But on the Saturday shows, we just would be in the office getting ready to go on, and Ed would be there too because there wasn't many people in the building. He'd walk in, he'd just sit down, and now we're about to talk about Marvel movies and other dumb nonsense. And Ed Lover comes in, what are you guys talking about tonight? And we're just hanging out with Ed Lover, and I'm like everybody else on my show didn't really affect them the way it did. I was like, you don't understand. I said, when I really started figuring out MTV, like around 10, I guess.
Yeah.
MTV Raps had just started. You also had Headbangers Ball and things like that. I'm like, these were iconic, life-changing moments, and now the guy is sitting on the couch in our office.
So it's funny, a little Ed Lover story. He used to do mornings here in New York. So mornings would start at 6 o'clock, your show. Ed would roll in at like 6:45.
Is this the Power Days or the Hot 97
Power days?
Okay.
Like that, the Power Days, because he started at Hot 97, then came to Power.
Right.
But yeah, Power Days, he would roll in at like 6:45, 10 to 7. I was still new. I'm like, dude, how could you do it? But
was Dre with him?
I don't know.
Okay.
I would just see Ed walk in at like 6:45. Nonchalant, not like you and I would be like sweating profusely,
right?
Like, oh my God, I'm late, I'm about to be fired.
But a lot of talents like that, because when they've been doing it so long, they're like, I've got enough in me that, look, if I got to kill an hour while you get stuff together, I can do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It's a power move I could never pull off, I don't think.
Yeah, there's the old radio term, for and out the door.
Yep.
Which programmers hate because that means their talent comes in, does what they do, and then the second their shift's done, they leave. They don't do anything extra. O&A used to do it. They would show up 5:30, and we'd go on at 6.
Yep.
And the second it was done, sometimes they would be like, we're running a little light today. It's like, do you think you can recut something with a different intro and have it play the last segment like we're still here? Yep. Because I used to save all their intros.
Yeah.
So I'd come out of breaks with music and their tracks and everything. It would sound like a real segment. And then about, the hardcore listeners about 5 minutes in and go, They go, motherfuckers, they left early. They're playing best. We call it worst of at the time. They're playing worst of. I've heard this thing before. Most of the audience didn't catch it or whatever, and they'd walk out at 9:30.
It happens from time to time when Elvis is doing television up at the Today Show or just leaving for a flight to go somewhere in the world for another job. Problem is, we can't do these smoke and mirrors anymore because of streaming and on demand. So people have already heard it to some degree. Not everyone, but the majority of people are like, they know when something is new and fresh versus old.
I know the numbers break down differently for a show like you did compared to a show that we did or Howard does.
Right.
I don't know what your TSL, your time spent listening, is to a show
About 20 minutes.
like Elvis's, but we used to have like an hour for our show and for Howard's show.
I can attest
right?
to that.
So that audience would know when we played something that they heard because they're there all the time. The majority of them were there all the time. We didn't have people in and out and commuting, for your stations and for what you guys do. Do people recognize that if you played something? They're like, you have people listening that intensively now that they know when you do something?
And I think it goes back to that.
Because that's really a good sign if you do.
It is. The people normally spend about 20 to 25 minutes, pretty much their commute. Now, given people are like, I'm in the car for an hour, whatever. The majority of people listen for about 20 minutes.
Right.
But at 10 o'clock, now that the show gets condensed down to 2 hours without commercials, they pretty much can binge it at any given time. So
The on demand?
Yeah. So they're more prone to, when they're listening from time to time live on the radio, they can call BS. But it's not like we're trying to pull it. We need to fill a void because Elvis is, traveling or doing another TV show or whatever. But recently, we just realized that we can only go so far with this. So we just started doing And the Morning Show.
It's Elvis Duran in the Morning Show.
Without Elvis, it's And the Morning Show.
Hello.
Should we just edit Elvis Duran out all week while he's on vacation or on his honeymoon?
On his honeymoon. Maybe we just scream over it.
Okay.
We're here! Dots!
Okay. Very good idea, Gandhi. We'll try that next break.
I have
That's
ideas.
great.
In the Morning Show.
It was funny and it was unique to do that. Obviously, if Danielle wasn't there or Gandhi weren't there, Elvis and you guys would carry everything. But if Elvis isn't there, like Howard wouldn't let his staff carry a show for the whole time, whether it's by design or if maybe they don't want to do it. But to have that kind of faith in the show that you guys built where he's gone for a week and you guys come in and you're all strong enough personalities and there's so many of you that you got everybody doing a little bit more on air wise than they normally do. And it was fine.
It gave everybody
that whole week was a different way of listening. It was something like I don't know if you'd want to listen to it all the time because people come to listen to Elvis, obviously. But knowing the fact that, all right, if something ever came up, God forbid an emergency or something scheduled came up there,
it's there.
The show can do it. They just did a week. It's doing it one day is enough of a feat to say like, hey, if we have a day, they can do it. But to do it for a week and it still be strong and still be okay is a real testament to everything you guys are doing where look, if we ever have to do that again, we don't want to, we can.
And that's what it was too. It's like, it's not fair because at the end of the day, our customers are the people listening and people like listening right now.
Right.
You want fresh content. You don't want to hear something you have already heard before. And Elvis had that realization let's do something new. There's, like you said, plenty of us. Let's just do it for the listener. So that's what it was.
So what do you do come holiday time then?
I think the plan for right now is just to do a straight best of because
it makes sense.
It's holidays and it goes by ratings and most people are not tuned in because their families, parties, sleeping in, off, whatever. So no need to do fresh content. But who knows? The cool thing is there's no set rules. Elvis could say, nope, let's do shows. Or you guys do shows.
We talked about some of the stuff that you do here. Can you shed a little bit more light on when the show's live?
Yeah.
What are you doing during that 4 hours while he's live?
I'm pretty much in a studio monitoring for anything. Like he would be talking about, what was he talking about? He was talking about Sam Smith redid like a Donna Summer commercial for Target for the song I Feel Love. He was like, it's stuck in my head. And the system that we have here, you're supposed to like order it through the corporate system and the radio friendly version supposed to pop up. But no one had access to it. So automatically you jump on a streaming service or YouTube or whatever, start loading it into the system. And by the end of the break, you throw it in front of
throw it on the button bar.
Throw it on Elvis's button bar, where he can play the audio in front of his face. It's like Christmas morning for him. He goes, oh, there it is. So I kind of like fill in those blanks of things when need
So you're
be.
doing auxiliary audio stuff when
you
can throw it in.
Yeah, on top of building a segment of the viral trending things that are happening in the world.
I got a hot new track for you.
Elvis Duran in the morning show. Elvis Duran in the morning show.
Garrett gets married.
Woo!
Yes. So you actually on the phone with your DJ that's going to play at the wedding?
Yes.
With a list of songs you don't want played at the wedding.
Yes, and there's reasons behind these songs not being played.
All right, now let's get into your countdown of the songs you don't want played. Let's go through your top 5.
So we're going to start off with Single Ladies by Beyonce. Everybody plays this song at the wedding, and on top of that, too, it has personal meaning to me because everybody just gave me such crap when I didn't propose to Allie yet. So they're like, oh, if you like it, you should have put a ring on it.
Oh,
so
okay.
this is a big F you to everyone that told me.
All right, I got it. F you. We're not playing that.
Next would be Jesse's Girl by Rick Springfield.
Now, why don't you want this played at your reception?
Allie's ex-boyfriend is Jesse.
All right, fair enough. My God. So far, you have great justification for both of them. Okay,
but at the end of the day, I was listening to the lyrics. I got Jesse's Girl, so,
you did.
so screw him.
Maybe you should play it. What's the number, the next on your countdown of songs restricted from your wedding?
The Electric Slide.
Okay, so what other dance songs, like group dance songs are out there?
The chicken dance.
The chicken dance. What's that one? He's like, you got to put your left foot in. The cha-cha slide. Can we go ahead and add that to the list?
It's up for debate right now.
Oh, the cha-cha slide. I tell you right now, if you play the cha-cha slide, I'm not giving you a wedding gift.
So messed up.
I know, and it's a nice wedding gift too.
Well, that just came off the list real quick.
I'm kidding.
You got it, sir.
Elvis Duran.
All right, so that's what you're doing with the morning show, and you talked about your duties for the station here in New York. But you also now have a podcast under Elvis's umbrella?
It's under Elvis's umbrella.
What's it called?
It's called Celebrity Buzz. It's cheesy, but we couldn't think of anything really where I have a guy named Rob Shooter who has a whole entertainment website. He's a gossip columnist. Pretty much his job is to find stories, not create stories, just find stories. He used to work for the National Enquirer, so he knows how to dig. He's British, so there's the accent, and we just talk about anything in the quote-unquote entertainment world because you kind of want to stay in your lane of your listeners, because at the end of the day, starting a podcast isn't easy, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
We have a platform where a bunch of people on the show listen, and they're listening for fun, entertainment, just a branch of that, go more deep into entertainment stuff. So it's an entertainment-based podcast.
I pulled a dumb listener move when I got a chance to hear your podcast, and I wrote you. I said, how are you guys doing this? Is he in London? Do you patch up through the studio, or do you record when he's in New York? And you're like, no, he's here in New York. And the way it sounds, he was in London. The way this whole thing worked out.
He's still learning mic technique too. So at times, like he's a very Rob Shooter's a very animated guy, so he's like this all the time. And so he's not up on a mic, but he's getting better on the technical side of things. But he's got a lot of information, a lot of stories that in radio, a good tease. Mm-hmm. So he could tease a story without giving an answer based off of the fact that I don't want to be sued, but here's what I know. And gets people start guessing. So he'll do like what he calls a blind item, like that are in some papers.
Right.
And then people start guessing online. He'll never tell the answer until the story comes out. People start talking about it, and people start, hey, did you hear this? And at the end of the day, it's trying to create content that at least gets people thinking or talking, or like at least having conversations about stuff.
Is gossip like in your wheelhouse? Like, do you follow a lot of that closely? I mean, are you doing it more now because of the podcast, or were you always kind of doing that?
I was more of a pop culture kind of guy, not more so the gossip side of it. It kind of falls hand in hand, but I'm more up on the current stuff of like what's going on in the world versus just like, did you hear what so-and-so said to who? Like, that's what I'm up. I'm up on the news because my whole idea growing up is if I'm going to be entertaining, I want people to be informed at least.
Right.
So that's where I take the look at it, whether it be a news story or whether it be a bunch of dogs going viral for burping the ABCs, everything in the middle. Something you would see on your timeline. That's what I figure that's what my job is. Like, I'm your personal timeline. I will give you a mix of everything, and as long as you get it, I know my job is done.
Who wants gossip? Who wants sleaze? Who wants dirt on celebrities? Rob and Garrett have the scoop, keeping all y'all in the loop. Naughty gossip's what Rob does. Elvis Duran presents Celebrity Buzz.
Well,
love this story. It's time for a nicest of the day.
Oh. Well, you know, the power of the Queen, you know, though she passed, what now, almost 2 months ago? You know, we're still learning stories. And I have a feeling we'll learn stories until the end of time about the Queen. So she became best friends with Tom Cruise right before she passed. Tom actually got to go to the Platinum Jubilee, but didn't get to meet the Queen, right? So the Queen was like, Tom Cruise was here.
Tommy was here?
Tom was here, and he didn't say, what is this about? Tommy. So the Queen actually invited Tom to come hang out at Windsor Castle.
Can you imagine?
Tom was sitting at Wimbledon or something.
That's right.
With Kate Middleton.
Just behind Kate and William. He likes the royals. Who doesn't?
The Queen probably saw that and was like, hey, get Tommy over to the castle. Let's go.
Come on,
and they
Tommy.
became best friends.
They had tea together, and get this, they planned to meet up again. They really hit it off. So they became like sort of friendly. Unfortunately, she passed away, so he didn't get to meet her again. That is it for today. Thank you so much for listening to the Naughty But Nice Show with Rob and Garret. And remember, all together now, if you're going to be naughty, you gotta be
you've got to be nice.
Take care, everybody. Pip, pip.
So you're doing this podcast, you're working on the radio show, you're working on the station. What do you want to do going forward? Because you're still a young guy in this industry here, and if the industry's still around as we get older,
I think it will be.
What do you want to do? What is your next goal?
I want my own show. I want to do my own show, kind of based loosely off of what Elvis has built, and do that. The coolest thing is, hey, I just had the crappiest day possible, but I turned you guys on for 5 minutes, and it put the biggest smile on my face, and I forgot about everything.
Right.
That is the biggest compliment anyone in the industry can receive, pretty much. Like, you affected someone's life so much that the worst part of their life is happening right now, but for 5 to 10 minutes, they forgot about everything.
Right.
And they just enjoyed what you were doing.
So you want your own show. Nothing's certain anymore. You used to have goals like, no, eventually I want to work at this station, or eventually I want to do a show like this person. And there's no guarantee that station or that kind of format or anything will be around, because everything's changing and moving so fast. What's the ideal situation? So you get your own show. Do you want to be a morning show? Do you want to be a syndicated show? Do you want to be a one market? What's the details?
I'm more of the locality. So like in the radio industry, they tell you got to, or just in the entertainment industry, you got to leave to come back. And I've never been one to, all right, I'm going to go to Colorado, throw on my Colorado Rockies hat.
Right.
I'm not from there. And it's no fault to anybody else that moves around the country to do that. It's just not who I am.
Right.
I'm born and raised here. I know streets. I know towns. I know people. It's in my blood. To go anywhere else, I'll just be an implant and faking it. And I can't fake it. You can only fake it so much before BS gets called. Though it's harder to find a permanent job here, as you and I both know, it's where I want to be.
So you want to be in New York.
I want to be in New York.
You want to do your own show.
Yeah.
All right. Those are great goals to have. And you obviously have the drive and the ambition to hopefully one day make that happen. And it's not even a matter of talent anymore. It's a matter of, well, what's the industry going to be?
Right.
Like,
you got to be ahead
will I
of
be
it.
allowed to even try to carve my name or try to make my way into these things? As we talk right now, 2 years from now could be completely different.
Of course.
Than what we know of it at this second. And we know that everything's changed and everything is, you got to be more mindful of number breakdowns and algorithms and your digital content.
Post, yeah.
Your digital content sometimes is more valuable than your live broadcast content. I learned that towards was seeing that towards the tail end of my tenure at SiriusXM, where we were doing great in the mornings, but our afternoon numbers for on demand were starting to creep up to what the morning numbers were.
Right.
Our morning numbers were not going down, but we were gaining in other parts based on the on-demand stuff. So people maybe were listening in the morning, but then they're like, I could just download the whole show later when I'm at work or going home.
Right.
And then those numbers would be added to everything there.
And it goes to show that people like the content. It's just, they're busy, just like anything. You and I are busy, and they find the time, and their time just happens to be in the afternoon or night. Not to say that we should, drop what we're doing and do an afternoon show, because then
it's just do it, put it out there. People like
listen
me,
when they want to listen.
You load it up on your phone, or you have it streaming in a browser, but you load up your phone with your podcast for your streaming, your music, whatever you're going to do. I can listen to it now while I'm doing the commute, while I'm working on the house, while I'm out shopping, while I'm doing whatever. It's on demand now. I don't have to sit there and wait and say like, man, I missed the morning show and I'm never going to hear what happened between 8 and 10 anymore. It's like, oh no, now I can because you can download it.
But it is funny, and you find those like handful of people will be like, I just moved to Tennessee and I can't get the show anymore. There's 9,000 different ways of getting the show.
The app streams, you can download.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do you see this business going?
I think it definitely goes the digital route. I think the turning point is the moment cars can start using streaming. They have it now, but it has, the higher end cars. But just like how every car has a radio, as soon as you could put some type of streaming service in there without having to pay a monthly subscription,
right?
I think
it's also the infrastructure too. Right. Like here in New York, you can see, and I've seen it for years, and I always wondered what it was. And then a handful of years ago, I asked somebody, and they told me what it is. So if you look at street lights or posts in the city, every now and then you see these little orange kind of cone things on top.
Yeah.
Those are relays for internet streaming.
Oh, interesting.
I had no idea. And somebody
I just know those ugly trees on the parkways and turnpikes of the world.
Some of the stuff Elon Musk is doing with Tesla, where the cars are mapped out every possible route in, at least in North America, that you go this way so you can find a charging station. You're not stuck with like, oh, we ran out of gas and there's no gas station. All your routes are programmed based on location services, that the internet's available on every highway and roadway and all stuff. When they get that down, it's not that far away. I think they get all that down and it streams into the car just like it would be if you were on Wi-Fi in your house. That's when I think broadcast kind of takes a backseat.
I think we're at the stages of like early Netflix days. Like right now we're getting the DVDs sent to the house and we got to return them after we're done. That's where we're
the
at.
Red envelopes.
The red envelopes. Like that's where we're at right now. And what did Netflix do? They kind of shut it down for a little bit. And then they're like, let's do streaming. That's the easier way.
Yeah.
I think that's where radio is kind of at right now, where the technology is there to a degree, but not fully there. When it will get there, don't know.
Does it worry you that to do radio, at least when we were growing up and everybody we idolized and worked for, you really had to have a skill set, have a talent, a knack for doing this stuff, and people for programming a station and all the other parts that go into running a radio station? Does it concern you that the technology is so readily available, and because of podcasting, everyone thinks that they could do what we spent a long time trying to learn how to build and study?
Well, you got to be good at
everybody. I know everybody's got to be good, but the market's so oversaturated with these things. Are you worried about that if radio goes full streaming, that it's just like, well, everybody's going full streaming, that nobody stands out anymore? Is it going to make it difficult for us to do this?
Well, I think at the end of the day, content is content, and though you can go on Amazon and buy a microphone and get all the equipment and sound like you're at a studio like we're at right now, you still have to be entertaining and compelling and thought-provoking to a degree. Anybody could just talk and talk and talk and talk, but as long as people are coming in and they're excited and they're interested, that's where I think where it's at. So not to say we have a leg up on people, but we do. People know, as opposed to starting from the beginning, because starting from the beginning, you're doing whatever it takes just to get a listener.
Right.
We have many listeners. So it's like we're kind of ahead of the curve as opposed to everyone else trying to play catch up.
Well, Garrett, thank you for, we spent a lot of time here and did a pretty deep dive on this, and it's been fascinating for me to geek out with you about all this stuff.
Please, let's geek out more often than every couple of years. Hey, it's Garrett from Elvis Duran and the Z100 Morning Show. I just did the Radio Inquisition with Erik. He has the smoothest hands I've ever felt.
Radio Inquisition.
And this concludes my interview with Garrett Vogel. You can hear him every weekday morning on Elvis Duran and the Morning Show, syndicated across the country, or you can hear the live shows or on-demand episodes through the iHeartRadio app. Thanks going out to Elvis Duran and everybody over at the Elvis Duran in the Morning Show, the Opie and Anthony Show, Rob Shutter, Pam's Jingles, Jam Creative Productions, and of course, John Feldman and Goldfinger. For more episodes of the Radio Inquisition, subscribe to the It's Erik Nagel Show feed on iHeartRadio, Apple or Google Podcasts, or anywhere you find your podcasts. Also, go over to youtube.com/It's Erik Nagel for the video versions of this and other episodes of shows that I do. Go hit the like and subscribe, as the kids say. Do us a kindness on there as well if you could. That's it. And until the next time, be seeing you.
Let's go! Long live my radio, it never lets me down. Long live my radio tonight. Tonight.
This has been Erik Nagel's Radio Inquisition.
It was the greatest gift, and he wanted other people to experience it.
Follow on all the social media platforms at It's Erik Nagel. For audio video links to this and other episodes, go to itseriknagel.com.